Let's get to work. Come on.
Welcome to the Master of Trades podcast with your host, Perry Allison.
Welcome to the Master of Trades podcast. I am your host, Perry Allison, and you are joining me today for his very special episode of Master of Trades. It's the presidential election episode. Hey! I am dressed as, I like to say, Paul Revere. He wasn't a military guy. He was probably kind of a shabby guy, kind of a roughneck, but this is my rendition of Paul Revere. I am here to tell you, listen up, listen up. Hear ye, hear ye. We got some things to talk about with the election cycle upon us. Let's discuss our government here in the United States. Why is this relevant for us here, Master of Trades? Business owners, forward thinkers, growth-minded individuals, we have to be interested in the structure of our government, okay? This is the field that we play on. This is the marketplace. This is the thing that contains the marketplace, and it is our either strong foundation for a thriving business, or it's something that works against us. And quite honestly, being someone who started a company in California and now lives in Dallas, Texas, I've seen microcosms of how restrictive and how free individual states can be. So at a macro level, this is massively important for us business owners to take interest in. Folks who are interested in starting a business, people who work within a business. We're talking about taxes, we're talking about regulation, we're talking about freedom of movement, and that's what we're touching on here today. We're not supposed to say these things. Shh, quiet. We don't talk about money. We don't talk about religion. We don't talk about politics. Why on earth would you not want us to talk about those three things? Because there's so much to say. There's so much to talk about. And if we don't talk about those three things, we can control a population and get them thinking what we want them to think about those three areas. We can keep them broke. We can keep them spiritually broke. And we can keep them politically ignorant. And on Master Trades, that is massively unacceptable. So listen, we are going to venture into those three things unashamedly, unabashedly. This is still America, and that First Amendment says I have the right to say whatever I want, as loud as I want, to whomever I want. You are free to listen or not, and I give you the permission to use your First Amendment right here today and to listen freely and to speak freely, okay? That is the essence of who we are as Americans. So let's get on into it. All right, let's lay a foundation here. We've got two opposing sides. We've got the Democratic Party, we've got the Republican Party. One party, the Republican Party, believes in small and limited government. The other side, the Democrats, believe in big and bloated and inflated government. Just by the way I said that, I know you can hear my bias, but my bias is well proven throughout history. Any government that's bigger than it needs to be always inevitably ends up encroaching upon the individual freedoms of its populace. Period. That's founded throughout history, and it always ends up leading to a miserable outcome for its population. Oh, what about Sweden? What about Norway? Listen, okay, those are microcosms. They don't operate at the scale that we do, and those are different circumstances. So listen, we are all about small government here at Master of Trades, and I'll tell you exactly why. We believe in government having one foundational obligation, and that is the protection of our society. That is to provide a common defense against our foes, okay, foreign primarily, but then of course domestic. So we have our wonderful military that has done a tremendous job all throughout history, from the Revolution, okay, to World War II, and to the wars in the Middle East. We love and honor our military as being the primary attribute of a successful government, is the protection of the people. We honor them and we thank them. Local law enforcement, okay? Domestic terror, domestic enemies. We have our local law enforcement agents. In the Bible, actually, I don't know if you know this, but it says that they are a minister for good. They are ministers of God. And they do not carry the sword, or in this case now in our day and age, the gun, for no reason. And what's funny is that the Bible says that there's only really one good reason to pay taxes. It says you should. It says you government, and we absolutely honor that. But there's really one good reason to pay taxes, and that is to support the payment of our law enforcement. I don't know if you know that. Small government, okay, providing us with basic protection. That's about it. eliminating regulations, stay out of our way, stay out of our homes, stay out of everything else, and let us play. That is the American way. That is the way that it was set up. That's the way it has been intended to remain, with an immense amount of individual liberty for its population. So we have the Democratic Party looking to expand. And in its expansion, we see not only of every department, every interest, every influence, every foreign situation that's happening, every war that has nothing to do with us, every instance of global opportunity for our government to come in and run its own businesses. We have these situations where our government has gone out of control in both its spending and also its needling. Big government doesn't have checks and balances in a way a small government would. Big government promotes career politicians, families who stay in power for long periods of time. And it's not even so much the length of time that they're involved, it's the fact that they make their financial nest egg off of their involvement in government. That's also the problem. Not based off of the salary that the people provide to that person, but the manipulative influences they have with America. Problem. Big government, especially with the foundation that our provides, directly conflicts with the intention of the foundation and the forming of America. So look, small government provides greater freedom to the individual. Big government provides less freedom to the individual, but promotes the idea of greater safety and security, okay? And those two, the more safety and the less safety, are facades. Those are not real, because the more power you flow to a government, eventually that safety and security washes away. As soon as that dominance and the control is well established and unchallengeable, that safety and security is eliminated, and you are made to be a pawn in their system to promote and propagate the further expansion of its power. Small government maintains individual liberty, which that individual liberty actually has the ability to create safety and security, or it has the ability to decide not to provide safety and security. And that is the contrast. That's the beauty, and that's the pain of, man, some people are willing to work and do what it takes, others are not. And you see those people throughout America. You see that contrast. You also see people that are disenfranchised, and that's a totally different case as well. Folks that are of a minority group, or a class of people that weren't given the same kind of mental faculties, physical faculties. That's a different discussion. And actually, in a smaller government, you have more wealth flowing to individuals, more individual freedom, and you actually find greater charity, more support for those disenfranchised classes, statistically and historically through our country. And that's why America is the single greatest charitable country that has ever existed on the face of this earth. It's because of that small government foundation that has allowed wealth to be created, and then to be consolidated within its people, and then to be pushed out by the generosity of that people, largely predicated on a spiritual responsibility to a higher power. That's a conversation for a different day. But talking about small government, okay, so we have the United States. For those of you who don't know, states are actually individual countries. When you talk about the state of Turkey, the state of Israel, these are individual countries, and the United States was actually created as a concentration of individual countries. Pretty cool. First time this has ever been done on Earth, where we have concentrated individual countries brought together in a collective standpoint. So you have the federal government, which is the collective body of the countries. And again, that federal piece should maintain its only interest in the protection of the macro, of the populace, to avoid foreign conflict and enemies, okay? Then you have the individual states. These individual states are individual countries. This is a perfect segue. Let's talk about Roe versus Wade. Having Roe versus Wade overturned was a good idea. Let me fix my wig here. On a national, federal level, the freaking federal government has no business telling its population what it's going to do or what it's not going to do. In this case, It was, hey, all states, you're going to allow this thing. I don't care if it was, you're going to allow Fruit Loops in every single one of your stores. It's wrong. So returning this decision back to states makes more sense. This is much more in line with the way that America was established. What state aligns with your ethical and moral standards? Okay, live there, go there. Let those states decide for themselves what they're going to do, what they're going to promote, and go and vote with where you live and be in those states. And you can have all the abortion or whatever it is you want to do, all the Fruit Loops in your store. Okay, that's the first thing. Leave it up to the states because that is in line with the American ethos. Doesn't matter what the conversation is. First of all, send it to the states. That's the first thing. Anything other than that is a violation, and it doesn't matter what the conversation is. It needs to go to the states. It will work out. The states will vote. The people of the states will vote. And if public opinion changes within the states that previously restricted, the people, we the people, the established individual liberty of our country is established on the individual opinion of the person. Let the people change the narrative in the state. Maybe one day all 50 states endorse a specific thing, but it's never because the collective force it on the individual state. Okay? So that's the first thing. The second thing is these conversations. Well, you know, little Becky was bleeding out in the hospital and she couldn't get support. I don't know how many times I've heard this like narrative from these sides that are trying to promote and allow for abortion. Is it plays on the heartstrings and manipulates a population from going any further in the conversation, because if you say anything against what my opinion is, now you're going against little Susie, who had this terrible situation. And like, yeah, it was terrible. If it's a true story, it's terrible. It's awful. At scale, what's happening with abortion is people are using this as a birth control mechanism. At scale. At scale, that's what it is. That's the matter. That's what we're dealing with. So the conversation statistically should be held in that regard. Should there be instances and accommodation for those one-off situations? If I said of course, and my personal opinion is of course, for those one-off situations, circumstances, let's list them all out and let's agree, like, these are terrible. This is terrible. A 10-year-old, this health situation, you know, with a heavy heart, let's make those decisions to allow accommodation for that. That's fine. Murdering millions of babies is not acceptable, especially when it's used as a means to circumvent responsibility and used as birth control. Like, that's just detestable. That's unacceptable, especially when all indications indicate that that's an individual and separate life. Treating life on Mars, you know, would be finding a cell. Our species we're the only ones that seek to destroy ourselves through abortion, okay? Through self-mutilation, through suicide, okay? These are, and through depopulation. Yeah, I'm touching on a lot of hot button issues, but I want to show you all these things result in the destruction of the human, okay? Taking the platonic family, the two-parent household, destroying that intentionally and incentivizing for it is just plain evil, okay? In terms of Roe versus Wade, all right, these use cases that are being parroted, it's nonsense. These are not the macro, this is the extreme micro, and having that used as a way to choke out all other opinions shows you the evil intent and the manipulative state of these people that promote these things. Let's talk about racism, okay? From one hot button issue to another, racism. There's no way to eradicate racism. There's just not. Newsflash, it's never going to happen. Not in any state, not in any place in this world, you're always gonna have racism. So that's the first thing. Why? Because humans by nature are incredibly prejudiced. They find contrast. We look for patterns. We look for safety in a community. The way that we were formed, are looking for people who look like us. We immediately associate subconsciously with safety in people who look like us, whether fat, tall, skinny, happy, emotional states, how you're dressed, okay, the hobbies you like. We're looking for patterns constantly and looking for people who look like us. This is subconscious, highly subconscious. So there is, of course, overt racism. And racism of any sort, prejudice of any sort, is low-level thinking. It's just, it's pointless, it's destructive, and it's invaluable. And I want to give you an example of this with my own personal life. So I'm a native Californian, Southern California all the way, massive Hispanic population, specifically Mexican population, all populations really. I mean, there's an incredible mixture of people in Southern California. But my homies were the Mexican population growing up. Elementary school, middle school, high school, like I associate and just, it was like peanut butter and jelly, like, and I didn't know any different. These are my guys. These are the people that had a similar humor to me, like similar things, okay? Lots of Mexicans like the Dodgers. I love the Dodgers, okay? This is where I found my community. I moved to Dallas and I realized, here's something that's interesting. I had more in common and I have more of a kinship, a feeling of family with the Mexicans in Southern California than I do with the white people here in Dallas. Like, I understand them better. I speak the same language. I have a similar standard for humor. Like, there's just a kinship. There's a relationship there that as soon as I start talking to, this is casting a wide net, but when you start talking to someone who understands you and you've grown up with, there's a connection there. Coming here to Dallas, the white population is entirely different. By the way, of all ethnic groups here in Dallas, okay, all the same ethnic groups in Southern California, totally different. The black population, the black community here in Dallas is entirely different than Southern California, in my perspective. The way that the white population, okay, carries themselves here, the Mexican population, it is a different flavor of all ethnic and racial groups. It's wild. It's been very interesting. But I guess in that standard, I'd be racist against white people. I want less to do with the white people here in Dallas than I do my Mexican friends in Southern California. Like, what are we actually talking about here? What nonsense are we going deep on and trying to create division? We're intentionally trying to create division instead of just calling things what they are. And that is complicated. Humans are messy. Here's what I teach my children. I teach them that hurt people hurt people. People who are hurt inside are seeking and looking and desiring to hurt somebody else to make them feel the way that they themselves feel. Racism is no more complex than that. So racism, guys, like a conversation to try and eliminate racism altogether, entirely pointless, okay? So what we're really seeing here, we've touched on a few things. I want to show you what's actually happening here. When these high powers start these conversations in abortion, they use these micro case studies to choke out anybody else's opinion. When they use hot button situations like racism, and it's like, if you talk about it, say the wrong thing, make the wrong step, and we're gonna label you. Dude, I'm not worried about it. I got First Amendment rights here in America. If I was a bigoted racist, like, go cry to your mama. Okay, but the fact that they use these things is trying to choke out the discussion. They're trying to choke out the conversation. They're trying to deter your attention from the real to the faded, to something intangible. What is racism? How is that expressed in our society? The result of that, it's so intangible, you can't lock it down. You can't address it. There's nothing you can do about it other than to accept that you're either a victor or a victim. And if you're a victor, you should be ashamed. If you're a victim, you never have hope of rising up. Be an angry victim. That's essentially what the narrative is here in America, and it makes me freaking sick. See what they're doing to our black population, our black children, our black community. By the way, any negative outcomes for an ethnic group here in this country, any circumstances and situations, is a poor result for the collective. If the black community here in America is suffering, then the white community in America is suffering, and the Asian population in America is suffering. That's just the fact of the matter, and that's not a story that they want us to tell. So it is imperative for white people to rise up and start participating in this conversation. It's time for Black America to welcome in white America, and for all of us to come to the table to share our experiences and our perspectives, to gain clarity in this situation, to bring everybody to the table and say, man, this is the marketplace. We're all invited and we're all allowed to thrive here, but it is going to weed out the weak. regardless of your skin color, is going to weed you out unceremoniously. So listen, to propagate these ideas is to divert your attention, which this is the main point. Of the superpower elites, those that actually run this nation, it's a layer of puppets and people who are propagating these nonsense narratives. And then you have corporate money, massive manipulative crony capitalism. That's the puppet master. And so think in terms of a magician. What does a magician do? Is magic real? No, of course not. What does a magician do? They distract and they deter. It's the sleight of hand. So these narratives that we're not allowed to participate or really lock down or really have any opportunity to solve because it's so vague is the sleight of hand to distract as the real magic is happening, as the real movement's happening. So to give you a little context as to why that's happening, this is what's going on. But racism is, honestly, it's the majority of it is nothing more than a prejudice on the contrasting differences between humans, between two people. You are different from me in this way, and that's just not something you're ever going to eliminate. Everybody operates with a level of prejudice, if we're being honest. Oh, you wear that brand of clothing? I don't. That is very closely related with racism country. Is there overt racism? Sure, but they're not players. They're not players in our society that actually make decisions and control things. These are people out of small towns, small minds, small thinking, and they have nothing to offer you anyways. So it's just a barking dog. Winston Churchill said that if you stop and throw stones at every barking dog, you'll never get where you're going. So yeah, there's going to be haters, there's going to be racists, there's going to be people saying terrible things, but don't stop your forward progress and throw stones at them. Now we're talking about taxing the rich. Tax the rich, they can afford it. Man, this is something I remember in high school. It made sense to me. I'm like, yeah, tax the rich. They have lots of money. They can afford to share it. Well, once you really understand how the economy works, how the marketplace works, how human innovation works, it's not that simple and it doesn't make any sense. Let's tax them because they have more. Great. How did they come to have more? They did more. They sacrificed more. They risked more. When you start to tax people that have more and get into higher brackets, first case, you start to eliminate their ingenuity to create more. You start to suppress human innovation and suppress it because the reward isn't big enough. You think Elon is going to start building rockets and cars, and if the reward is not big enough to make him the richest man on the planet, do you think he's literally going to run 7 impossible companies and not have the reward of becoming the world's richest person? No. If he was taxed to death and only able to keep a sliver of that reward, he's not going to have the enthusiasm to go and create at that scale. By the way, and this leads me to my next point, what is he growing at scale? He's growing businesses, he's growing industries, he's growing economies, he's growing environments where he hires people and he pays people to grow these organizations. Okay, so that's the second reason why this doesn't work. It's because people who have made a lot of money, they happen to know how to manage a lot of money. They happen to know what to do with money. So to have a government run by a bunch of career politicians who are there because of their parents, who have no experience in the marketplace, who know nothing about how to manage their own money, but only grow their personal net worth through manipulation and insider trading, to have these people take the money of people who have been proven in the marketplace at the biggest of scales, like, that doesn't make any sense. It's like saying, hey, I'm really good with money. You seem to be terrible with money. You have a deficit. You haven't passed a budget. You don't know how you're spending. You're spending on innocuous and crazy ideas. Yeah, that sounds good. Let me give you hundreds of millions of dollars. It doesn't pass the sniff test. It's not logical. It doesn't make any sense. So taxing the rich, what you're doing is you're taking away the resource. You're taking away the fuel that they would otherwise use to put it into engines that create more opportunity for people. In fact, we need to be taxing less. We need to be taxing these richest people less so that they have more resource to go and create opportunity for the rest of the population. These ideas are only propagated by people who actually know better, but followed by people who actually don't know anything. They're scarcity minded. There's no scarcity of money. There's no scarcity of resource, but there is scarcity of people who understand how the marketplace work and understand how to make the marketplace bigger and more expansive. Okay, so that doesn't make sense. We need to stop taxing altogether, all right? Tax on sales, on product purchases, but the massive amount of taxes that they take from my business, okay? So they tax me when I buy materials. They tax me when I sell materials. They tax when I pay people, and they tax my people when they're paid. They tax my people when they buy things, and they tax people where they live. They tax them in the city, they tax them in the street. Okay, Dr. Seuss couldn't outline all the ways that they tax our people and how our people know what to do with the money better than they do. All right, the border. Okay, we got border problems, y'all. We got people flooding into our country, and that's a problem. Oh, don't you love people? People escaping from bad situations? Yes, of course, of course. What we're looking at now, mass influx of people who don't align with our values, don't know our values. You know, they don't know our values. And honestly, it's not, I don't blame them. Like, they're not the bad guy here, by the way. Immigrants are not the bad guy. If the door is open, I would walk through it too, for the record. I'm not like, hey, dude, the door is open. I'm coming into the land of opportunity. So they're not to be demonized. But it's the control mechanism by which people come in, which is a problem. Because immigration without assimilation is invasion. Assimilation is the act of becoming like the environment that you're going into. The act of becoming like that environment, to align with their standards, to know the laws and abide by laws, to understand the ecosystem and how did things flow. How do we vote? Why do we vote? What's important to protect? How was this country founded? All of these things need to be known and to be learned. But again, there's a strong case to be made that even our population doesn't understand these things. So this is a nuanced conversation, but to have mass immigration is a setup for destruction. This is the biggest problem in our country, because if you look at it, where are these people coming from? I had this thought the other day. We could be letting in, and probably are, letting in entire armies and dispatches of military-aged young men from specific countries, not Mexico, but letting in these who are trained militants, and they take over populations. I mean, this is something that could happen at scale, millions of people flowing through. These are things that are possible and have actually been founded through research done. China, for example, has been sending through people who are here for reasons not seeking asylum. Okay, that is something that has been founded, but they are not here for asylum. Many of these people are, and I don't quite understand from the left or the right. The left says bring them all in. Who cares where they stay? Who cares what they eat, where they live, how they live? Bring them in. The right says keep them out. Keep them out. We don't want them here. But who is actually in the middle with these people? Who's in the middle with immigrants? Who's in the middle with the Black community? Who's in the middle with the LGBT community? Who's in the middle with these segments of the population actually interested in helping? Who's in the middle with single parent families? Instead of just using them as a political discussion and a pawn, who's actually looking out for these folks? The border is this conversation. We need to have more sensitivity and support for the people that are here, to see that they thrive and they assimilate to our way of doing, to make them valuable parts of our economy, to see them promoted and to thrive. That's the best part of America. But people got to come here in an organized fashion. This is an organization. This is a business. Businesses don't become successful by accident. They become successful with great leadership, great process, great culture, lots of clarity, and lots of accountability. When you don't have those things happening at a national level, that is breeding destruction, just like they would on a business level. So Master of Trades, all of you masters out there, thank you for joining me on this special edition episode. I hope you learned something. I hope you expanded your mind around this idea of our government. I hope you get out there and vote, okay, this November 5th. Be great, vote your virtues, vote your faith, get out there and do it. We'll see you on the next episode.